What happens when a beloved prince sits down for what should be a simple interview and finds himself under attack from someone who's supposed to make guests feel welcome? In just 34 seconds of one comment, everything spiraled into one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history. Prince Harry walked onto the View set that morning, expecting a conversation. He'd done dozens of interviews before. He knew how to handle tough questions. He knew how to stay composed. But what he didn't know was that Whoopi Goldberg had decided this wasn't going to be a normal interview. The audience clapped as Harry took his seat. He smiled, waved, settled into the chair across from the panel. The lights were bright. The cameras were rolling. Everything seemed normal at first. "So, Prince Harry," Whoopi started, and right away her tone had an edge to it. "You've written a book. You've done interviews. You've talked about your family quite a bit." Harry nodded. "Yes, I wanted to." "Share my story." "Your story," Whoopi repeated, leaning back in her chair. "See, that's interesting to me, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been cashing in on your family's pain." The studio went quiet. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably. Harry's expression didn't change, but you could see something flicker in his eyes. "I wouldn't characterize it that way," Harry said calmly. "I've been sharing my truth about experiences that affected my mental health." Whoopi laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. "Your truth. Mental health. These are all buzzwords, aren't they? You grew up in a palace. You had everything handed to you. And now you want us to feel sorry for you?" "I'm not asking anyone to feel sorry for me," Harry replied, his voice still steady. "I'm trying to help people who've gone through similar struggles with family dysfunction and loss." "Family dysfunction," Whoopi said, shaking her head. "You know what real family dysfunction is? Real family dysfunction is not having food on the table. Real family dysfunction is not knowing if you'll have a roof over your head. You're sitting here, a millionaire many times over, complaining about your privileged life." One of the other hosts tried to jump in. "Whoopi, I think—" But Whoopi held up her hand. No. I want to hear this. I want to hear how hard it was growing up with servants and private jets and the best education money can buy." Harry took a breath. "Material wealth doesn't protect you from emotional pain. My mother died when I was 12 years old. I was walking behind her coffin while the world watched. That's not something money fixes." "Oh, here we go with the mother card," Whoopi said, and the audience gasped. "Listen, a lot of people lose their parents. They don't write tell-all books about it. They don't go on television every other week talking about how hard their life is. I think there's a difference between processing grief and exploiting it," Harry said, and now his voice had an edge too. "I've spent years in therapy trying to understand my trauma." "Therapy," Whoopi scoffed. "Another luxury most people can't afford. You know what most people do with their trauma? They go to work. They take care of their kids. They don't have time to sit around talking about their feelings with expensive therapists." The other hosts were looking at each other now, clearly uncomfortable. The audience was completely silent. This had gone way past a normal interview. "I think you're being incredibly dismissive of mental health struggles," Harry said, sitting up straighter. "Just because someone has money doesn't mean they don't suffer." "Suffer?" Whoopi said, drawing out the word. "You want to talk about suffering? Let's talk about the people who can't pay their medical bills. Let's talk about the people working 3 jobs just to survive. Those people are suffering. You're just upset that you can't have everything exactly the way you want it." "That's not fair," Harry said, his composure starting to crack. "You don't know what I've been through." "I know you had a choice," Whoopi shot back. "You could have stayed and done your duty. Instead, you ran away to California to live in a mansion and complain. You know what we call that where I come from? We call that being spoiled." Harry's jaw tightened. "I left because the environment was destroying my mental health and my wife's mental health. We were being attacked every single day by the press. Megan was having suicidal thoughts. Was I supposed to just stay and watch her suffer? So it's Megan's fault now? Whoopi said, raising her eyebrows. You're going to blame your wife for your decisions? That's not what I said at all, Harry responded, his voice rising. I said I was protecting my wife. That's what a husband does. A husband also doesn't trash his family on international television, Whoopi said. A husband doesn't write a book exposing private family moments. A husband doesn't make his grandmother's final years difficult by causing all this drama. My grandmother understood, Harry said quietly. We spoke before she passed. She knew why I made the choices I made. Oh, how convenient, Whoopi said. She's not here to confirm that, is she? You can say whatever you want now. That was the moment. That was when something shifted in Harry's face. His eyes went cold. How dare you, he said, his voice low and controlled, but shaking with anger. How dare you use my grandmother's death to score points in an interview? That is beyond disrespectful. I'm being disrespectful, Whoopi said, leaning forward. You're the one who's been disrespecting your family for years. You think you're special because you're a prince? You're not special. You're just another entitled celebrity who thinks the world owes them something. I never said the world owes me anything, Harry said, standing up now. But I do think I deserve basic respect. And I certainly deserve better than this ambush. Ambush? Whoopi laughed again. This is called journalism, sweetheart. These are questions people want answered. If you can't handle tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Tough questions are fine, Harry said, his hands clenched at his sides. Personal attacks are something different. You haven't asked me a single genuine question this entire time. You've just been trying to humiliate me. One of the other hosts finally spoke up. Maybe we should take a break. No, Whoopi said firmly. We're not taking a break. Harry came here to talk, so let's talk. Let's talk about how you've made millions of dollars off of criticizing your family. Let's talk about how you claim to want privacy, but you can't stop doing interviews. Let's talk about the hypocrisy. There's no hypocrisy, Harry said. I wanted privacy from intrusive press coverage. That's different from choosing when and how to share my own story. Your story, Whoopi said mockingly. Everything is always about you, isn't it? What about your brother's story? What about your father's story? They don't get to defend themselves, do they? Because they actually follow protocol. They could defend themselves if they wanted to, Harry said. They choose not to. That's their decision. Or maybe, Whoopi said, pointing at him, maybe they have more class than you do. Maybe they understand that some things should stay private. Maybe they actually care about the institution they represent. I cared about that institution, Harry said, his voice breaking slightly. I served it for my entire life. I went to war for my country. I did charity work. I showed up for every event I was asked to attend. And you know what I got for it? I got to watch my wife be torn apart by racist coverage. I got to relive my mother's death over and over again. I got no support, no protection, nothing. Racist coverage, Whoopi repeated. Now we're playing the race card? It's not playing a card when it's true, Harry said. The treatment Meghan received was absolutely influenced by racism. The comments, the headlines, the comparisons to Kate. It was all rooted in prejudice. Or, Whoopi said, or maybe people just didn't like her because of her behavior. Did you ever think of that? Not everything is about race, Harry. Sometimes people are just unlikable. The audience gasped again. This was getting worse by the second. You're calling my wife unlikable? Harry said, his face reddening. You don't even know her. I know what I see, Whoopi said. I see someone who married into the most famous family in the world and then complained about the attention. I see someone who knew exactly what she was getting into and then played victim. She didn't know what she was getting into, Harry said, his voice shaking with anger now. Nobody can truly understand what that life is like until they're in it. The palace, told us they would protect her. They lied. They hung her out to dry. They leaked stories about her to protect other members of the family. According to you, Whoopi said, according to your version of events. But you're not exactly an unbiased source, are you? Why would I lie? Harry demanded. What do I have to gain from lying? Attention, Whoopi said immediately. Money. Relevance. You were the spare heir. You were never going to be king. This is your way of staying in the spotlight. I never wanted the spotlight, Harry said, and he sounded exhausted now. I never asked to be born into this family. I never asked for any of this. I just wanted to live a normal life with my wife and children. Then live it, Whoopi said, spreading her hands. Go live your normal life in your California mansion. Stop doing interviews. Stop writing books. Stop making documentaries. Just go be normal if that's what you want. I'm trying to make a difference, Harry said. I'm trying to use my platform for good. Your platform, Whoopi said, and she actually rolled her eyes. Your platform that you got from being born into royalty. You didn't earn it. You didn't work for it. You just happened to be born to the right parents. And now you're acting like you're some kind of hero for talking about your feelings. Mental health advocacy is important work, Harry said. If my story helps even one person, it's worth it. How noble, Whoopi said sarcastically. Saint Harry, saving the world one interview at a time. Give me a break. You're not a mental health advocate. You're a talk show guest with family drama to sell. Harry stared at her for a long moment. The studio was completely silent. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. You know what? Harry said finally, his voice quiet but firm. I came here today in good faith. I thought we were going to have a conversation, but this isn't a conversation. This is you trying to tear me down for entertainment. And I'm not going to participate in it anymore. Oh, so you're leaving? Whoopi said, smirking. You're just going to run away, like you always do when things get difficult? I'm not running away, Harry said, reaching up to remove his microphone. I'm choosing not to engage with someone who has no interest in listening or understanding. There's a difference. This is live television, Whoopi said, her smile fading. You can't just walk off. Watch me, Harry said. He pulled the microphone off completely and set it on the chair. The other hosts were frozen. The audience was dead silent. Cameras were still rolling. This is incredibly unprofessional, Whoopi said, standing up now too. You agreed to do this interview. I agreed to an interview, Harry said, turning to face her. Not a character assassination. You've been rude, dismissive, and frankly cruel from the moment I sat down. You've mocked my mother's death. You've insulted my wife. You've questioned my service to my country. And you've done it all with this smug attitude, like you're somehow better than me. I am better than you, Whoopi said, and her mask of professionalism was completely gone now. I worked for everything I have. I came from nothing. I earned my place at this table. You were just born lucky. And that makes it okay to treat me like this? Harry asked. My circumstances of birth give you the right to be cruel? You're so sensitive, Whoopi said, shaking her head. This is exactly the problem with your generation. You can't handle any criticism. Everything is a microaggression or a trauma or an attack. There's criticism, and then there's what you've been doing, Harry said. And I think you know the difference. What I know, Whoopi said, stepping closer to him, is that you're a spoiled brat who's never been told no in his entire life. And the minute someone pushes back on your narrative, you fall apart. I'm not falling apart, Harry said calmly. I'm making a choice to remove myself from a toxic situation. That's actually healthy. Toxic situation, Whoopi mocked. Everything is toxic to you people. Your family is toxic. The press is toxic. This interview is toxic. Maybe the common denominator is you, Harry. Maybe you're the problem. Harry looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the cameras. Then he looked at the audience. "I want to say something to everyone watching," he said, addressing the camera directly. "If you're in a situation where someone is disrespecting you, where someone is trying to make you feel small, you don't have to stay. You don't have to subject yourself to abuse just because someone has a platform or power. You can walk away. You should walk away. And that's what I'm doing right now." "Oh, please," Whoopi said. "You're really going to play the victim card right now? On my show?" "It's not about being a victim," Harry said, still looking at the camera. "It's about having self-respect. It's about knowing your worth, and I know that I deserve better than this." He turned and started walking toward the exit. Whoopi called after him. "If you walk off this set, you'll regret it," she said. "This makes you look weak." Harry stopped and turned back one more time. "You know what makes someone look weak?" he said. "Bullying someone on television because you think you can get away with it. Attacking someone's dead relatives to win an argument. Using your power to humiliate a guest. That's weakness, Whoopi. What I'm doing right now, this takes strength." And with that, he walked off the set. The cameras followed him as he moved through the backstage area, past shocked producers, past security, right out the door. He didn't look back. He didn't hesitate. He just left. Back in the studio, Whoopi stood there, her face a mixture of shock and anger. The other hosts didn't know what to do. The audience was whispering. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of the fallout. One of the producers was shouting something about going to commercial. Another was running after Harry. The whole thing had devolved into chaos. But Harry was already in the hallway, already heading for the elevator, already done with the whole situation. A staff member tried to stop him. "Mr. Prince, sir, please, we need to—" "I'm leaving," Harry said simply. "Thank you for your time." He got in the elevator. The doors closed. And that was it. He was gone. The whole thing, from that first dismissive comment to Harry walking out the door, had taken less than 15 minutes. 15 minutes that would be replayed over and over. 15 minutes that showed exactly what happens when someone decides they've had enough. Because here's the thing about that moment. Harry could have stayed. He could have kept trying to defend himself. He could have gotten angry and yelled back. He could have fought fire with fire. But he didn't. He made a different choice. He chose to remove himself from a situation that wasn't serving him. He chose his own peace over the show's ratings. He chose dignity over engagement. And in doing that, he proved something important. He proved that walking away isn't weakness. It's not running away. It's not giving up. Sometimes, walking away is the strongest thing you can do. Whoopi had tried to paint him as spoiled, as entitled, as someone who couldn't handle tough questions. But what the audience saw was something different. They saw someone who knew when enough was enough. They saw someone who refused to be disrespected. They saw someone who valued himself too much to stay in a hostile environment. The contrast was stark. On one side, you had Whoopi, using her platform to attack and belittle. On the other side, you had Harry, staying as calm as he could under increasingly hostile questioning, until he finally decided he didn't have to take it anymore. The interview had started as what should have been a normal conversation. Harry had come prepared to talk about his work, his family, his life. He'd expected some challenging questions. That's part of doing interviews. But what he got instead was a systematic attempt to break him down. Every answer he gave was dismissed. Every point he made was mocked. Every vulnerable moment was used against him. Whoopi wasn't interviewing him. She was prosecuting him. And she was doing it with an audience watching, cameras rolling, knowing he couldn't really defend himself without looking defensive. It was a power play. And for a while, it seemed like it might work. Harry was getting frustrated. His composure was cracking. He was starting to raise his voice. Whoopi was getting exactly the reaction she wanted. But then something shifted. Maybe it was when she brought up his grandmother. Maybe it was when she called his wife unlikable. Maybe it was the accumulation of every dismissive comment, every eye roll, every mocking tone. Whatever it was, Harry made a decision. He wasn't going to play this game anymore. And that's when everything changed. Because once he decided to leave, once he committed to that choice, Whoopi lost all her power. She could mock him for leaving, sure. She could call him weak or sensitive or whatever else she wanted, but he wasn't there to hear it. He was already gone. The walk off the set wasn't dramatic in a theatrical way. Harry didn't storm off. He didn't throw anything. He didn't slam doors. He just calmly removed his microphone, explained why he was leaving, and walked away. It was almost quiet in its intensity, but that quietness made it more powerful, because it showed that this wasn't an emotional outburst. This was a conscious choice. Harry wasn't losing control. He was taking control. He was deciding that his mental health, his dignity, his self-respect were more important than finishing an interview. And you could see it register on Whoopi's face. The moment she realized he was actually leaving, that he wasn't bluffing, that she had pushed too far. The moment she realized that her show was about to become famous for all the wrong reasons. She tried to recover. She tried to make it seem like she was the reasonable one, like Harry was being unprofessional. But it was too late. The audience had seen everything. They'd watched her attack him for 15 minutes straight. They'd seen the cruelty in her questions, the dismissiveness in her tone, the pleasure she seemed to take in trying to break him down. And they'd seen Harry handle it with as much grace as anyone could be expected to have in that situation. He'd tried to answer her questions. He'd tried to explain his perspective. He'd tried to have an actual conversation. But you can't have a conversation with someone who's already decided you're the enemy. That's what the interview showed. It showed what happens when someone in power decides to use that power to humiliate rather than illuminate. It showed what happens when an interview becomes an interrogation. And it showed what happens when someone finally says no to that dynamic. The whole thing was a masterclass in contrasts. Whoopi kept getting more aggressive, more personal, more cruel. Harry kept trying to stay calm, to be reasonable, to find some middle ground, until he realized there was no middle ground to be found, until he realized that the only winning move was not to play. Walking off that set was Harry reclaiming his agency. For 15 minutes, he'd been at Whoopi's mercy. She controlled the questions, the tone, the direction of the conversation. She had the home court advantage, the support of her co-hosts sitting right there, the audience in front of her. Harry was alone in that chair, being attacked on live television. But walking off changed all that. Suddenly, Whoopi didn't control anything anymore. She couldn't ask him questions if he wasn't there. She couldn't mock his answers if he wasn't giving them. She couldn't continue the attack if the target had removed himself. It was such a simple act. Standing up, removing a microphone, walking away. But in the context of that interview, in the context of everything that had been said, it became something more. It became a statement, a refusal, a line in the sand. This is what happens when respect isn't given. This is what happens when someone decides their dignity matters more than your show. This is what happens when enough is finally enough. The cameras captured all of it. Harry's face as he made the decision. The moment he stood up. Whoopi's expression shifting from smugness to shock. The confused looks on the other hosts' faces. The silent audience. The walk through backstage. The elevator doors closing. Every second of it was recorded and would be analyzed and discussed and debated. People would have opinions about who was right and who was wrong. They'd argue about whether Harry should have stayed, whether Whoopi crossed a line, whether the whole thing was planned or spontaneous. But none of that really mattered. What mattered was that in that moment, Faced with a choice between enduring continued disrespect and removing himself from the situation, Harry chose himself. He chose his peace. He chose his boundaries. And that choice, that simple act of walking away, said more than any answer he could have given to Whoopi's questions. It said that he knew his worth. It said that he wouldn't be diminished. It said that some things are more important than finishing an interview, or maintaining appearances, or being polite in the face of cruelty. The interview that was supposed to expose Harry as spoiled or entitled or hypocritical ended up exposing something else entirely. It exposed what happens when someone with a platform uses it to attack rather than engage. It exposed the difference between tough questions and personal attacks. It exposed the power of simply saying no, because that's what Harry did in the end. He said no. No to the disrespect. No to the mockery. No to being used for entertainment at his own expense. He said no, and he meant it, and he backed it up by leaving. And in doing so, he turned what was meant to be his humiliation into something else, into a moment of strength, into a demonstration of self-respect, into an example of what it looks like to protect your own peace, even when everyone is watching, even when walking away might be criticized, even when staying might seem easier. The whole thing lasted just 15 minutes, but those 15 minutes captured something true about power, respect, boundaries, and the courage it takes to enforce them. They showed that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Or rather, the most powerful thing you can do is remove yourself from a situation where you're not being treated with basic human decency. Harry walked into that studio as a guest. He walked out having taught everyone watching a lesson about self-worth. And he did it without yelling, without attacking back, without stooping to Whoopi's level. He did it with quiet dignity and clear boundaries. That's what made it so memorable. Not the drama of the confrontation, but the clarity of the choice. The moment when someone decided they'd had enough and actually followed through. The moment when walking away became not an escape, but an assertion. 15 minutes that showed exactly what happens when an interview stops being an interview and becomes something else. When questions stop being questions and become attacks. When a conversation stops being a conversation and becomes a performance of cruelty. And 15 minutes that showed what one person can do in response. Stand up, speak their truth, and walk away with their head held high.